How should your front-end communicate with the backend? Is direct link with the service through an API always the right solution? Or should you rather create something like a gateway that will forward your request? As always, it depends. Let me shed some light onto it. Let's start with the pros and cons of direct communication with the server. Third-party providers. Direct communication through an API is a good choice when you don't plan to develop your solution for a specific need and rely on third-party providers. That's the case of the integrations with different applications via an API, such as Google Services, Maps, or Gmail. That's often an efficient solution for new businesses and startups. It saves time and money and helps you focus on developing your business. Small apps. If you've developed a small microservice-based application, then sending requests directly to that service might be a good option for you. It can work well, especially when the client's solution is a service-side web app. This approach is also beneficial for your developers that would like to have full control over the requests sent to the server. Coupling. When a client's app communicates directly with the microservices, they're coupled. The client needs to know how the app is structured and decomposed into microservices. Its composition complexity can translate into serious problems with the entire app maintenance. Any major change or code refactoring introduced to your backend will impact your app's performance. This will force you to update your application more often, slowing your business operations. Bad user experience. Nobody likes to use slow apps, and if your application sends multiple requests to different services, it can result into many round trips between the client and the server. The outcome is simple: poor user experience caused by the network latency. Okay, but what about the other option? How does the API gateway work, and what are the advantages and limitations of this approach? Advanced applications. When your application is based on microservices, the client will need to handle multiple calls to the endpoints. This workflow can be very time-consuming, especially when your app is evolving. Sending requests from different clients like web apps, mobile apps, or single-page applications also causes problems with direct communication. In this case, implementing an API gateway is the right solution. It stands between the client apps and the microservices. Client apps connect only to a single endpoint, the gateway, which sends requests to individual services, gathers a response, and sends it back to the client. Security. An API gateway is also a good choice when implementing advanced security functionalities such as authentication. Each microservice needs to know if the client is allowed to retrieve data. Implementing it to the API gateway will work well for all microservices, as the authentication process is performed along with the request being sent to the gateway. If the URLs of your requests are well structured, the gateway will know if you're allowed to get the data from the service. This solution is much more secure than direct communication because the microservices endpoints are not public, and the space for possible hacker attacks is much smaller. Downtime. When your business grows, the architecture needs to accommodate new clients, the demand grows, and new requirements arise. Over time, your solution starts to look like a monolith, or speaking more directly, like an inflated balloon that's about to burst. Remember that the API gateway is coupled with your microservices. If this balloon bursts, the same happens to your application. The optimal solution here is to stick to the backend for front-end pattern. It involves creating a few different API gateways, each for every client that will try to send requests to the microservices. Team capabilities. The last thing you should consider is your team capabilities. Building an API gateway requires a full-time job of a backend developer. Sometimes a team of full-stack developers can work too, but if they all have the front-end background, the solution might lack some crucial backend logic. And lastly, as I've mentioned before, some developers would not be satisfied with the API gateway solution, as they would love to have full control over their work. So these are the different factors you need to consider before making a decision. Summing up, your choice will depend on whether your application is small and does not require many integrations, or whether it's an advanced microservice-based application. There are also risks of downtime related to both approaches, so you need to think about which one is easier to avoid for your development team. So as always, it depends on your needs. If you need any expert advice, you know where to find us.